name is Jonathan Rosenberg, and I'm one of the co-writers of 33 and the Third House of Dreams, which we'll be seeing in about 45-50 minutes. So let me introduce our guests. This is Mark Guerrero over here. Mark began playing in rock and roll bands at the age of 12. He led a popular East LA band called Mark and the Escorts, who recorded 2 singles for GMP Crescendo Records. He also recorded as a solo artist for Ode Records, produced by Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Lou Adler, Capitol Records, and with his group Tango for A&M Records. His songs have been recorded by the likes of Herb Alpert, Trini Lopez, Chan Romero, and his late dad Lalo Guerrero, known as the father of Chicano music. Mark's performed on stage with Redbone, Eric Burden, Denny Lane, El Chicano, Tiara, Lalo Guerrero, and many others. As a Chicano and East LA music historian, Mark has written over 100 articles, hosts a radio podcast, and has been a guest on numerous radio and television programs. He's also a consultant for musicians and lectured at universities. Mark Guerrero. And our moderator for this evening is TK Arnold. TK should be very familiar to Southern California and San Diego specifically fans. He is the publisher and editorial director of Media Play News. And in the late 70s, he started Kicks, which was San Diego's first rock and roll magazine. He's also been a freelance writer for The Reader, San Diego Reader, I should say, LA Times, and San Diego Magazine. He's been on CNN and E! Entertainment, amongst others, talking about home entertainment and technology trends, and he was the San Diego connection for his friend, rock and roll legend Kim Fowler.
Who recently passed away.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, yeah. So, TK Arnold, and I'm off the stage.
You know, one thing that I've done is I've been a rock critic. I'm covering entertainment and movies now, but I've been a rock critic for about 40 years. And when they asked me to moderate this panel, you know, of course, yes, I'm an expert in Chicano rock. So, boom, you start researching it. And one thing I found researching it is that this gentleman's name keeps popping up all over the place. And not just for what he's doing now in terms of you know, chronicling the whole legacy of the 60s East Side sound, but as a performer. This guy was the real deal in the 1960s. Mark and the Escorts, in fact, they got a second life a couple of years ago with the big movie Logan Lucky with Daniel Craig, better known as James Bond. And I think they played the whole entire song in there.
The whole record was playing in the movie. It's crazy. 52 years later.
So, you know, so we kind of get two really interesting historical motifs here. We get Mark Guerrero and we get Gold Star. And Mark, why don't we talk about, first of all, how did you two come together?
Gold Star?
You and Gold Star.
Okay, well, I had a band at the time. It was called 1984. It's confusing. It was the year 1968, but the name of the band was 1984, named after the George Orwell book about Big Brother watching over you, like it's getting now. And yeah, but my favorite band at the time was Buffalo Springfield. Remember them? Yes, Richie Furay, Stephen Stills. And so I saw in one of their record jackets that they had recorded at Gold Star Studios. So I told my guys, let's go there. You know, maybe somebody will rub off on us. And we had already recorded our Mark and the Escorts records. We recorded with my dad a lot. We had studio experience, but so we just had the initiative to just rent it out. We just booked Gold Star for ourselves. We didn't have a record company or anything. And at the time, it was pretty inexpensive. But then again, money bought a lot more back in the 60s. But it was only like $40 an hour. And so we went 4 ways and $40 a piece, and we got 4 hours at Gold Star. And we recorded 2 songs and in 4 hours. And we pulled it off. And that led to a record deal. That led to getting signed by Kapp Records, K-A-P-P, which was an MCA label. So that's how that happened.
And 1968, something else was happening around that time besides Gold Star. There was a very, very vibrant music scene in LA. I guess, you know, on the east side of LA, and it's now, you know, considered a pretty historical chapter.
Yes.
Tell me about the east side of LA.
Well, the east side sound really started in East Los Angeles. And by the way, East Los Angeles is an unincorporated part of LA. It's not a city. There's no mayor and no, it's just a county. It's a sheriff. Everything's county. but it's this no man's land there just east of downtown, and it was predominantly Mexican-American, and a gigantic music boom just exploded like the Big Bang around 1963. And so through the 60s, from about 63 on, there were countless bands, and I'm not exaggerating when I say maybe hundreds of teenage bands, and there coincidentally happened to be tons of teenage venues. And that doesn't happen today. Like we were playing every weekend at various, high school auditoriums, Serbian halls, church auditoriums and union halls. We were working literally, and Ernie was in my band back then. We were working every weekend as 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds. So it was a huge scene, and many of the groups wound up with national hit records. The premieres were first with, remember anybody, Farmer John, anybody older?
Yeah.
Farmer John, I'm in love with your daughter. National hit, East LA group. And the Blundells had a national hit with a song called La 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 La, which was written by Stevie Wonder. La 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 La. And then the Cannibal and the Headhunters had a national hit with Land of a Thousand Dances. Na, 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 na. And they went on tour with the Beatles. So this little East LA group from the Projects wound up touring with the Beatles in 1965. They did Shea Stadium, Hollywood Bowl. It was like a dream. So this East LA not only had a huge, vibrant music scene, but many of them started getting national hits. The Midnighters had a regional hit. Then later El Chicano came along and went on from there. But it was a tremendous scene.
Yeah, Rhino Records even put out a compilation, History of Latino Rock.
Yes.
And in fact, a couple of those songs that you mentioned are on the record collection. If anybody's a serious music fan, there's these CD sets called Nuggets. And they're basically the late 1960s garage band sound. And they have, all that stuff. I mean, the Midnighters, and I think El Chicano's on there.
Hey Peggy, should you be closer to the mic? You should probably get the mic a little closer.
Can you hear me better now?
There you go.
I'm usually a kind of a loud person, so.
Yes. But no, we wound up in a couple of those. And our record wound up on like 5 compilation albums over the decades as like a garage rock classic. And it wound up in the movies, so go figure.
Now, looking back at those days, it may be too hard to isolate into one memorable moment. What was one of your most memorable moments? If you have a couple, that's fine too.
In the 60s?
Yeah.
Well, so as I was saying, there was all these groups, and many of them were managed by the same person, a guy named Billy Cardenas. And he managed all the groups I just mentioned, the Premiers, Blundells, Cannibal Headhunters, and us. And there was a big concert at the Shrine Exposition, Shrine Auditorium, 1965, and like there must have been 15 East LA groups playing there. All those people, the Midnighters, were the most popular Midnighters. And it was a huge show there, and like everybody came together for that show. It's called, what was it? West Coast, East Side, what is it called? Something like West Coast, East Side Sound.
Yeah, sound.
Yeah, and an album came out, and it was pretty cool.
And what was the strangest memory you had back then?
Strange. Well, there was a lot of, it's probably not unusual, it's not, just us, but there was a lot of competition between bands. When you get a bunch of teenagers, pubescent teenagers, with young people with egos and bands, there was a lot of foul play. Like one time we were playing at this gig, and the rival band just unplugged us. we were all plugged into one strip. So he just went, and all of a sudden we're singing, there's drums and there's no instruments. So that was, there was that kind of thing. There was another one where we were the headlining group at a high school dance, and this other popular group was playing our breaks. We'd go 45, they'd do 15, and they didn't like that. So after the dance, they tried to jump us. I mean, they wanted to like beat us up. Luckily, we had a couple of big roadies with us and we backed out. But, it was like pretty hardcore competition going on. So that was good.
Amazing. Now, Phil Spector is part of the producer who's most associated with Gold Star, and yet you ended up in your career working with another producer who was also kind of in that elite category, a gentleman named Lou Adler. What was that like?
Wow. It was overwhelming. By the way, I keep looking up at Ernie, because the gentleman up there was in all my bands in the 60s and 70s, so he's witnessed to a lot of this stuff. I may be asking him some questions. But we had done an album in 1969, the group 1984. We did it on speculation. We didn't have a record contract. We did 10 of my songs in 6 months. We had this access to this studio where we had virtually free studio time. We would record like from 12 midnight to 6 in the morning. We're only like 19 years old. We were, you know, just went recording every night. We took 6 months to record 10 songs. And you know, we were taking our time, we were playing games, we were smoking herbs and all kinds of stuff. And anyway, then I wound up getting signed to Lou Adler, you know, and suddenly it was like big time and no nonsense, and I got to play with the guys that they call the Wrecking Crew. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. The greatest drummer of the 60s, Hal Blaine, played on every hit you can think of, from Mr. Tambourine Man to Strangers in the Night by Frank Sinatra, to Up and Away by the Fifth Dimension. You know, he played on all the association hits, Windy and Nevermind. He was the guy. So he comes and he's my drummer, and the best bass player is Joe Osborne, and Lou Adler and A&M Studios. And I played the song for him. They go, okay, they got it in 10 minutes, and they did it like, you know, within 20 minutes, it was all over in half an hour. And I was like in shock because I was used to taking my time. But it was like, you know, that's how the big time works, and these guys are triple scale, and you know, studio time is really expensive, but it was a great experience. And he brought in some female background singers. I got Darlene Love, who was in the Crystals, who did all those Phil Spector records, and Mary Clayton, who wound up singing with the Stones. It's just a shout away. So these major African-American female trio of singers singing on my record. And a string section, it was like, I couldn't believe it. It was just big time. I was in shock. I was only 21. So I was like, what it was like.
You know, at this point, can we hear something from...
You want to hear Mark and the Escorts? You want to hear
I'd love to hear
Lou Adler? Or?
I'd like to hear both.
Okay, I'm the little guy with sitting on the amp. Wasn't it cute?
Adorable.
Thank you. And right on top of me is Ernie standing right there. He's still cute too.
He certainly is.
And then to my right, to your left, is Rick Rosas, who years later wanted to be Neil Young's bass player, Joe Walsh's bass player for years. He's passed away about 5 years ago. And so that was Mark and the Escorts. On the website is the story of the sessions.
Just go and check out.
That's how I looked in 1971. 21 years old. Was I still cute? I'm not cute anymore, so I can say that.
I find you quite attractive, Mark.
Thank you. So there's the record, see right there. Lila, Love Me Tonight.
Gold Records.
Yes.
Big label.
So here it is, man. This is. So I wrote this song, words and music, and I'm playing the guitars and lead vocal. Louder. Here you go.
Place
Nobody just said it's time to go with Lila Love.
Okay, so
Alliteration.
so it's not some long lost heartthrob who never did love you that night.
No.
Okay. And can we hear a Mark of the Escort song?
There it is. So in 2000, they put out a CD and a vinyl called East Side Sound featuring Mark and the Escorts, and all 4 songs we recorded in 1965 were put on this album. They put us on the cover, and there was other East LA bands on it. But this is Get Your Baby that wound up in the movie. It's just an instrumental. I'm playing guitar, and we're just screaming in the background. Keep in mind we were like 14, 15 years old. Anyway, going on from there.
How many time, by the way?
We've got about 20 minutes.
Okay.
We've got to make sure you get the gold star stuff in too. Go ahead.
Yeah, and now let's go way back in time, before
Jurassic
1984 and 68 and 69,
Okay.
and Mark of the Escorts. How did you get into music in the first place? And I think we have to talk about your dad at
Right.
this point too. So let's roll back to
Okay,
your.
well, my dad was a musician, so obviously it's in my genes, not these genes, but it's in these genes too. But also, he was in his underwear writing songs at his house and eating chili. And music was just part of my life.
Tell the audience a little bit about Lalo. I mean, about what a figure he was.
He was a pretty wide figure, about 100 pounds overweight a lot of the time. But he grew up very poor in Tucson, Arizona. Tons of kids, brothers and sisters, came to LA with no money, and wound up with Vocalion Records, and then went on to Imperial Records. He had a trio, and he was a songwriter, singer in every genre you can think of, and he became very legendary among Mexican Americans and very well known in Mexico, but unknown to the rest of the country pretty much.
Yeah. But one song, he did an awful song.
Oh yeah, the one that made him known around the country was he did a parody of Davy Crockett. Remember those old enough? Born in mountaintop in Tennessee, Davy Crockett. He did it, Pancho Lopez, about a Mexican. He was so fat he could almost not see. He could eat 12 tacos when he was only 3. And so that was a hit, sold like 500,000 records. So that was a nice little thing. He bought a nightclub, and that kept the family going after that. But he did a lot of comedy things. He did children's. He did like Alvin and the Chipmunks. He did the Mexican version of They Were Squirrels, and he did like 20 albums of those. And I was one of the squirrels many times, and wrote a few of them. And then he wrote 2 songs that are standards in Mexico, Canción Mexicana and Nunca Jamás, songs that have been recorded by all the great Mexican singers, male and female. So it's a really mixed bag. Plus, he was the first one to use Mexican slang on records. In the late 40s, he was doing boogie-woogie, swing, and blues in Spanish, using Mexican slang. And that wound up in the movie Zoot and Play, some of those songs. So he's known for a lot of different things. And he passed away in 2005.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in East Los Angeles, thank God, thank goodness. But yes, it was a family thing, and I played clarinet in the school band for 6 years, and Ernie was a drummer. I met him in the 3rd grade in elementary school. And then when I was 12, I started playing guitar, and I got an electric guitar when I was 13, and one day Ernie, who lived 3 doors down from me, came over and said, "Hey, I got a guitar player for you, come and play with us." And I said, "No, I'm playing hide and go seek, you know, I don't want to leave." And I go, "Come on." Okay, and I got my amp guitar, and that was the beginning of the Escorts. And we just started playing house parties, and grew from there and turned into Mark and the Escorts. That's how it happened.
And when you were growing up, were you conscious about that there was a scene?
Well, there wasn't a scene until about 1962 or 3, really. We started right when the scene started. So I saw it happen right from the beginning, and all those groups come out of nowhere. Interestingly enough, it was happening at the same time as the Beatles in Liverpool, like that same period of 62 through whatever, 65, 66. In Liverpool, there were hundreds of bands and hundreds of venues. Huge boom happening at the same time. But real quickly, I'll say that in 2004, I went to Liverpool, and I got to meet a lot of the musicians of the Beatle era, and play with them and whatever. And I've been there 3 times total now. But I wrote an article called East LA Meets Liverpool, because I was the one that went over there to meet them, and because we both had scenes at the same time. But there were other things, kind of like Headhunters playing with the Beatles was East LA meeting Liverpool.
Now, did you go over there expressly to meet some of these?
I went over there because it was like a pilgrimage. I love the Beatles so much, I wanted to go there and see all the sights. But online I met this drummer from that era. And he said, "Well, come here and I'll introduce you." And so I went over there, they loaned me instruments, they put a band together for me, and we did gigs here. We did 3 or 4 gigs. I was on the radio on BBC Merseyside talking about the East Side Sound and the Beatles. And then I went back 2 years later, played at the Cavern where the Beatles started. And then I went back last summer and took Chan Romero with me, Mr. Hippie Hippie Shape. And we did a bunch of gigs and a panel discussion at the British Museum. So I've got a relationship with Liverpool.
Yeah, it's funny because, on a note of a pilgrimage, last night I saw Justin Hayward of the Moody Blues up at the Coach House, and he was talking also about that when he came to the U.S., back then, before the Moody Blues started out, there were no British rock heroes. So his heroes were Buddy Holly and Elvis Presley. Right. And before the Moody Blues began, he made a pilgrimage out here to Lubbock, Texas, to go to the high school where Buddy Holly played, and to go to Elvis's birthplace in Tupelo, and the streets of Memphis.
Oh, you've got to do the pilgrimages. I've been to Memphis as well.
So let's go back to 1984, the band, not the year. So tell us about how your career progressed, and what you were doing.
It was really interesting because Mark and the Escorts were like 63 to early 66, but the times changed, and groups like Mark and the Escorts and Bobby and the Esquires became passé, because that was the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, different kind of names. So we changed the name to the Men from Sound, and Ernie, me, and Rick Rosas, who I told you one, we were the core. Guys came and went. We got new guys. We became the Men from Sound. We became very popular in East LA. Then, in the late 60s, times changed again into Cream and Jimi Hendrix and different types of groups and different music. So we changed our name again, this time to 1984. And we kind of got a little bit into psychedelic stuff. So we moved with the times. And then we got that record deal with Cap Records. And then I split off with the guys, and that's when I got the Lou Adler deal. And then when I went with Capitol, they came back with me. And when I was with A&M, we became Tango. So it was all like 4 people going through most of it.
And what have you been doing now?
Well, I still, what I'm so grateful about is I made my living in music my whole life. That's not easy. I've done everything from big concert things to roadhouse bars to truck stops to bar mitzvahs. I've done everything, restaurants. So I've been everywhere, down to every level. But I never had to get a real job. So that's pretty cool. I feel like I beat the system a little bit. But yes,
it is a real job.
It is, yeah.
It is a real job. I know. It's a job I love, so it doesn't feel like it sometimes.
He works quite a bit.
You made? So anyway, I made my living. But in 1998, through a couple of accidents, I wound up starting this website. And somebody asked me to write some articles in a local newspaper, so I said I'll write about Chicano groups. And then when I got the website, I threw those articles on there, and that's how my website was kind of born by accident. And since then, I've interviewed hundreds of people, I've written tons of articles, and sort of become considered some kind of a historian. And I've been asked to speak at Ohio State University, UCLA, UC Berkeley, museums, and I do, you know, lecture performances on history of East Side Sound, history of Chicano rock. And lately, I taught a class on the history of the Beatles at the Cal State San Bernardino Palm Desert campus. And in January, I'm going to do a history of Bob Dylan. And that's Rick Rosas on the left, Tony Rodas, and that's Ernie, who's standing back there, with a silly hat with a feather and a light bulb. And that's me sitting.
I had an idea.
What was the idea? What was the idea now? And then that's me sitting down there.
What year was this?
68. Maybe
You
just,
guys would have beat me up.
were you even afraid if you ran into us?
Definitely would have beat me up. So yeah, let's hear something by 1984.
There's another one, that's where we're standing on, that's black and white. That was us at the time we did that. I'm going to play this record because it's... So this is what we recorded at Gold Star in 1968.
And we'll leave with this, so can you please give a hand for TK and Mark?
Thank you. This is my attempt to be like Iron Butterfly. Fuzz Toad on the guitar. The lyrics are a little too heavy. I was young. Remember, I was 18. And I'm on guitar.
She walked along the bay. Her hair was shining bright, bathing in sunlight. I'd never seen such a beautiful thing before.
Wall speed. Very 1968. Back into 4/4 time.
Her hair was blowing in the wind. She looked at me and gaily grinned. The feeling in me grew. I didn't know what to do. I stood there staring at her amber way.
my website, markguerrero.com.